"You're embarrassing me in front of my real family." Those were the words my daughter, Emma, said at her engagement party last month. The same daughter I had raised for 29 years. The same daughter who had inherited $33 million overnight and suddenly decided I wasn't good enough to be seen within her new world. Emma had just inherited this fortune from her mother's side of the family. And in that one sentence, she made it clear, my role as a hardworking father had no place in her new, glamorous life. What she didn't know was that I had been hiding a truth about who I really was for the last 25 years. And it was all about to come crashing down. See, I'm not just some construction worker. There's so much more to my story than Emma realizes. And when I saw her disown me at that engagement party, I knew I had to show her something she had never seen before. My name is Jake Williams, and this is the story of how my daughter, who had everything, would lose it all in just 72 hours. It all started when I met Rebecca. She wasn't from money. I was a construction foreman, she worked at a local law office. We built our life together, raised Emma, and struggled, but we were happy. And then Rebecca passed away 6 years ago. It was just me and Emma after that. I wasn't rich. I worked long hours on construction sites, making a good living but not the kind of life anyone would call luxurious. I drove an old Ford F-150. I wore work boots that cost more than most people's monthly rent. My clothes were always covered in dust. But I was proud of the work I did. Proud of being able to provide for my family, even after Rebecca was gone. But Emma didn't see it that way. Over the years, she'd become more and more disconnected from who I was. More and more ashamed of the life I had built. It started at her wedding. 3 years ago, she seated me with the catering staff instead of at the family table. When I asked her why, she said, "Dad, you'll be more comfortable with people who understand your situation." I thought that was just her being awkward, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of Emma treating me like I was nothing more than a worker, beneath her. After that, things started getting worse. She married Bradley Sterling, a man from old Beverly Hills money. His family owns luxury hotels. Bradley didn't like me either. I could see it in his eyes. I wasn't part of his world, and neither was Emma. She changed. She stopped calling me for advice, stopped asking me to be involved in her life. Everything that had mattered to me, the bond one shared with her, started slipping away. Then, the inheritance happened. Rebecca had kept a secret from me. She had family money I never knew about. Old money. The kind of money that came with lawyers, trust funds, and very specific rules. When Emma turned 28, she inherited $33 million. $28 million in a trust fund, plus $5 million in immediate cash. It didn't take long before Emma's life changed. She bought a $2.8 million Beverly Hills penthouse. She shopped at stores where a dress cost more than most people's cars. She was living a life I didn't even recognize. But that wasn't all. The inheritance came with conditions. Emma had to donate $500,000 annually to charity. She had to maintain respectful relationships with surviving family members. And she had to submit annual reports proving she met these conditions. Emma, of course, ignored all that. She focused on the money and the lifestyle. The fine print didn't matter to her. She joined the Beverly Hills Country Club, paying $50,000 annually for the privilege. She started networking with people who were far wealthier than I had ever been. People like the Ashworth family. Richard Ashworth owned a private equity firm worth $800 million. His wife, Caroline, was a chairwoman of 3 different charity boards. Their son Marcus was the perfect young man, Harvard Business School graduate, future CEO material. And Emma, desperate to impress them, started acting like I didn't even exist. The breaking point came a couple of weeks ago, when Emma invited me to lunch at the country club. I thought this could be a chance to reconnect, to repair our strained relationship. Instead, she handed me a business card. "Dad," she said, not looking me in the eye, "I need you to understand something. My life has changed. The people I associate with now, they have certain expectations." I looked at the card. It was for an image consultant. Sarah Mitchell, image consultant to the Beverly Hills elite. $500 per session. "What exactly are you asking me to do, Emma?" I asked. "I'm asking you to get some help," she replied. "Learn how to dress appropriately. Maybe take a class on social etiquette. You could even say you're retired instead of what you actually do." Her words stung. I'd worked hard my whole life to give Emma the best I could. And here she was, asking me to change everything about who I was just so she could keep up with her new world. I handed her the card back. "I'm proud of what I do," I said. "Well, I'm not," she said. No hesitation. "I've worked too hard to build this new life to have it undermined by someone who doesn't understand the rules." "The rules?" I repeated, shocked. As if respect was something you could buy at Nordstrom? That's when I realized something. My daughter, the one I had spent years raising, had forgotten the most important lesson I ever taught her: it's not about what you wear. It's about how you treat people. I should have walked away right then. But I stayed. I made one last attempt. "Emma, I've been your father for 29 years, I said. Doesn't that count for something?" She looked around the country club, making sure nobody was listening. Then she leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "Not anymore, Dad," she said. "Not in my world. What would you do if your own child disrespected everything you had worked for your entire life? What would you do if the inheritance you gave them came with conditions, but they ignored every single one?" Stay tuned, because things are about to get a lot more complicated. "Not anymore, Dad." Emma's words hung in the air, more painful than anything she had ever said before. My own daughter, the one I raised with everything I had just told me I no longer mattered in her world. And the worst part? I knew she meant it. The last few years, I had watched her slip further and further away from me. I thought it was just the natural progression of things. She had become an adult, gotten married, started her own life. But this was something different. This was a decision to turn her back on everything that had made us family. For a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The pain, the betrayal, it was almost too much to handle. But I wasn't going to let it show. I couldn't. As Emma turned away, mingling with her new circle of wealthy friends, I stood there, heartbroken, but still standing tall. I had spent my life teaching her what mattered: honesty, hard work, loyalty. And now, she had forgotten it all. I excused myself from the party. I needed air. I stepped out onto the terrace, looking out over the city below. The lights of Beverly Hills twinkled like stars, but they felt distant, as though they had no place in my world anymore. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had kept in my wallet for years. It was a number I had never expected to call, but tonight had changed everything. "Margaret, this is Jake Williams. We need to talk." Margaret Davis was Rebecca's family lawyer. I had known her for years, but we had never been close. I had never needed to be. After Rebecca passed, I had kept to myself, focusing on raising Emma and running my construction business. But tonight, everything had changed. And I needed help. "I've been documenting everything, Margaret," I told her. "Every insult, every public humiliation, everything she's done to disrespect me. I have text messages, photos, audio recordings. I've been keeping track. I think it's time we do something about it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could tell Margaret was processing what I was saying. Jake, she finally spoke, her voice measured, are you sure about this? Once we start the review process, there's no going back. This could destroy Emma's entire inheritance. Are you ready for that? I didn't hesitate. She's already destroyed it. I've spent 25 years building something I'm proud of. I won't let her tear it down because she's ashamed of me. Margaret sighed. All right. Let's do it. The next few days were a blur. I had never imagined I would be in a situation like this, but here I was, taking action against my own daughter. The inheritance, the money that could change her life forever, was now in question. And it was all because of her behavior, her complete disregard for the rules Rebecca's grandmother had set in place. I didn't care about the money. I never had. But I did care about the respect that came with it. Respect for family, for hard work, for the values I had instilled in Emma. I spent the next few days gathering everything I had. Photos, texts, voice recordings from family gatherings and the country club. Everything I had could potentially be used against her in the inheritance review. I didn't want to do this, but I had no choice. On September 14th, exactly 13 days after Emma's hurtful words, it all came to a head. The engagement party was in full swing. 200 guests from Beverly Hills society had gathered, eager to witness Emma's grand debut. The place was immaculate, the food was exquisite, and the champagne flowed freely. But amidst all the wealth and glamour, I felt out of place. I didn't belong here, and neither did Emma, not anymore. She met me at the entrance, her smile stiff and forced. "Dad, you came," she said, her voice cold. "Of course, I came." "It's your engagement party," I replied, my voice even, though inside I was seething. She looked me up and down, and I saw her jaw tighten. She led me away from the crowd, away from the important people she was trying to impress. "We need to talk before you meet anyone important," she said, guiding me to a corner near the bar. "Dad, I need you to understand something tonight," she began. "What's that?" I asked, my heart racing. I had no idea what was coming. These people, the Ashworths, the Parkers, they're potential business partners. Bradley's family has connections throughout Los Angeles. This night is important. I nodded, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "Congratulations, Emma. What does that have to do with me?" She glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned in and whispered, "It has to do with how you present yourself. Your job, your image. You need to understand, Dad, that this, the way you look, the way you talk, the work you do, it's not going to cut it." I felt my blood boil, but I kept my composure. I'm a construction foreman. I manage projects worth millions of dollars. I supervise crews of 50 people. That is professional. She waved me off, the contempt in her eyes palpable. That's not what these people will hear. They'll hear blue collar. They won't see you as our kind of people. Our kind of people? I repeated, stunned by her words. "You know exactly what I mean," she said, her voice cold. "It's not just about who you are. It's about how you're perceived. And right now, you're embarrassing me." I felt the words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't react. I couldn't. Not yet. Before I could say anything, a couple approached us. The man was tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The woman was elegant, with jewelry that looked like it had been passed down for generations. Emma, the woman air-kissed both of Emma's cheeks. The party looks divine. Such a beautiful event. Emma's voice changed instantly. It became higher, more affected. I'd like you to meet my father, she said, her smile pasted on like a mask. I extended my hand. Jake Williams. Nice to meet you. Richard Ashworth, the man in the suit, shook my hand with the grip of someone who had never done manual labor. He was polite, but distant. And what line of work are you in, Jake? Emma hesitated, her chance to stand up for me slipping away. She could have said anything that showed respect for the work I had done. But instead, she hesitated for 3 full seconds before speaking. Dad's in development, she said, her voice strained. Project development. Not construction. Development. I opened my mouth to correct her, but she shot me a look, warning me to keep quiet. Commercial or residential? Richard asked, his interest piqued. Before I could answer, Emma jumped in again. Dad works on large-scale projects. Very complex. Lots of moving parts. I stood there, silent. It wasn't true. None of it was. But I had no choice but to let her lie. Fascinating, Caroline Ashworth, Richard's wife, said. We're always looking for qualified development partners. Perhaps we should schedule a lunch sometime. But before I could say anything, I simply looked at Emma. Actually, I said, my voice calm, I should clarify something. I'm not in development. I'm a construction foreman. I supervise building projects. The temperature of the conversation dropped instantly. Richard's handshake became polite but distant. I see, he said, nodding slowly. Well, that's honest work. Caroline gave a tight smile. How nice. Manual labor is so important. Within 60 seconds, they excused themselves, and Emma stood there, furious, her face red with anger. What was that? She demanded. That was honesty, Emma. I'm not ashamed of what I do, I said, my voice steady but firm. And I won't pretend to be. She grabbed my arm. Do you have any idea what you just did? Yeah, I do, I replied, meeting her angry eyes. I told them the truth. I didn't lie about who I am. But Emma wasn't listening. She was too consumed with her image, her new life, her new friends. What happens when the lies you've told to fit in come crashing down? Stay tuned, because Emma's life is about to change forever. The rest of the evening was a blur. I walked away from the engagement party feeling like I had been punched in the gut, but somehow, I still stood tall. I didn't know what to expect next, but one thing was clear, Emma's world was about to come crashing down, and I wasn't going to be the one to soften the blow. I stepped outside onto the terrace again, trying to gather my thoughts. The cool evening air didn't help ease the weight in my chest. I could still feel the sting of Emma's words, the way she'd looked at me like I was beneath her. The truth was painful. But it wasn't just the pain of rejection. It was the realization that my daughter, the person I'd raised, had become so disconnected from who I was, from where we came from, that she had no idea what it meant to truly respect someone. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the city lights below, lost in my thoughts. The construction projects I had overseen, the bridges and highways I had built, felt like they belonged to a different life, a different me. But I had never been ashamed of it. It had provided for Emma, for me. It had given us a life that was honest, no matter how hard it had been. And yet, here I was, standing in the middle of one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America, treated like a second-class citizen by my own daughter. As I stood there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw the name on the screen, Margaret Davis. The lawyer I had called just a few days ago. The same Margaret who had agreed to help me hold Emma accountable for her actions. I took a deep breath and answered. Margaret. Jake, we need to talk, she said, her voice serious. I'm listening, I replied, bracing myself for what was about to come. We've received confirmation from the Inheritance Committee, she said, and I could feel the gravity in her tone. They've reviewed all the documentation you provided. The evidence is clear, Jake. Emma violated the terms of the inheritance. I could hear the weight of those words hanging in the air. For a moment, I was silent. I had known this was coming. But hearing it out loud made it real. What's the next step? I asked, trying to keep my emotions in check. They will notify Emma within the next 72 hours, Margaret explained. She will have the chance to comply with the inheritance terms, or she will lose everything. I knew what that meant. The $33 million. The penthouse. The cars. The life she had built for herself. It would all be gone. You said she has 72 hours, I said slowly. What if she refuses? What happens then? If Emma continues to disregard the terms, Margaret replied, the inheritance will be revoked. All of it. The money will go into a charitable trust. It's in the documents. If she doesn't follow the rules, she loses it all. The assets will be liquidated, and the money will go to charity. I stood still, the cold air rushing through my lungs as I processed the news. Emma had spent her whole life chasing status, trying to build a life based on appearances. But now, her life as she knew it was on the line. The very thing she had fought so hard to protect, the money, the lifestyle, the social standing, was slipping through her fingers. I let out a long breath, my mind racing. I had never wanted this. I had never wanted Emma to lose what she had. But she had made this choice. She had crossed a line. And now, there would be consequences. I hung up with Margaret and walked back inside. The party was still in full swing. People were laughing, toasting, enjoying themselves, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. As I headed toward the exit, I saw Emma again. She was talking to a group of guests, laughing and carrying on, completely unaware of the impending fallout. But as I passed by her, I caught her eye. She didn't smile. She didn't say a word. She just stared at me like I was a stranger. I paused for a moment, wondering if I should say something, anything that could open her eyes to the reality of what was happening. But I knew it wouldn't matter. She had made up her mind. I left the country club that night with a heavy heart. But I knew what I had to do. I had to let the Inheritance Committee do its work. I had to let Emma face the consequences of her actions, no matter how hard it was. The next 48 hours were tense. I couldn't stop thinking about Emma, about what had happened and what was coming. I knew I had done the right thing, but that didn't make it any easier. The thought of losing my daughter, of watching her unravel everything we had built together, was a heavy burden. I spent the days and a days, trying to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to Emma. I hadn't heard from her since the engagement party. Not a call, not a text, not a single word. I wasn't surprised. She was too proud to admit she had made a mistake. Too proud to apologize. But I knew she would have to face it eventually. It was on the morning of the third day that I received the call. It was from Margaret. Jake, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. The Inheritance Review Committee is ready. They've completed their findings, and they've made their decision. Emma will be notified shortly. My heart sank. This was it. The moment that would change everything. What happens now? I asked. The committee will give Emma one final chance to comply. If she chooses to respect the terms of the inheritance, she will be allowed to keep everything. If not, she'll lose it all. I nodded slowly. And if she refuses? Then she forfeits everything, Margaret said. It will all go into a charitable trust. There will be no turning back. I took a deep breath. I didn't know what Emma would choose. But I knew one thing, whatever decision she made, it would have consequences. It was late evening when the final call came. I was sitting at home, trying to prepare myself for what was about to happen. I had no idea what Emma's response would be, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Then, my phone rang. It was Margaret. "Jake," she said, "I have news. The committee has completed its review. Emma has chosen to forfeit the inheritance." I was stunned. I had expected her to fight, to try to manipulate her way out of it. But she had made her decision. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "She chose to forfeit it all?" "Yes," Margaret confirmed. "She has signed the papers. Everything goes into the charitable trust. The assets will be liquidated." I felt a wave of emotion crash over me. I had never wanted this. I had never wanted Emma to lose everything. But she had chosen it. She had chosen status over family, money over respect. And now, she had lost it all. I sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the news. There was nothing more to say. Emma had made her choice. The consequences were real. The inheritance was gone. The penthouse, the luxury cars, the clothes, the social circle, it was all slipping away, leaving Emma with nothing but the choices she had made. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, staring at the empty space in front of me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end of something I had spent my entire life building. But I had no choice now. The choice had been made, and I could only watch as it all fell apart. I had never wanted to be in this position. I never wanted to see my daughter lose everything she had worked so hard for. But this wasn't about what she had. It was about how she had treated me, how she had chosen to ignore the very values I had tried to teach her. I was torn between anger, sadness, and a deep sense of disappointment. The Emma I knew, the one who once looked up to me, who once admired the life we built together, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had forgotten everything that truly mattered. I had raised her to understand that respect wasn't something you could buy. It wasn't something that came with wealth or status. It was earned, one choice at a time. And in her pursuit of status, Emma had ignored the very thing that had made me proud of her. She had forgotten what it meant to respect others, and now she was paying the price. The day of the forfeit the following morning, the repo men arrived to take back the Bentley. The $200,000 car she had been driving, no longer hers. I didn't see the car leave, but I knew it would. It didn't matter how much she cried, how much she begged. The decision had been made. And then came the next blow. The Beverly Hills penthouse. The place she had called home for the past year, the luxurious apartment filled with designer furniture and views of the city skyline, gone. Foreclosure proceedings were already in motion. The money she had spent on that place, the money she had flaunted in front of everyone, was about to disappear. And there was nothing Emma could do to stop it. By noon, her credit cards were cancelled. The banks had caught wind of the inheritance issue, and her accounts were frozen. All the things she had bought, all the luxury that had come with her new life, gone. I had no intention of calling her. I wasn't going to call her and rub it in. But I couldn't help but wonder, would she finally understand? Would she finally see the damage she had done to herself? The phone rang again, and this time, it was Bradley Sterling. Emma's fiancé, the man who had been so willing to ignore the red flags about her behavior because of her wealth. "Mr. Williams, I think we need to talk." Bradley's voice was calm, almost too calm. "What about?" I asked, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. "About Emma," he said slowly. "About what happened. I just don't understand. Is she really going to lose everything?" I sighed, a deep, exhausted breath. "She's already lost everything, Bradley. The question is what she plans to do about it." "I don't think she understands what's happening," Bradley said. "She's been a mess. She's been staying with friends since Tuesday. She doesn't know how to live without money, and now she's lost everything. Maybe this is the wake-up call she needed," I said, my voice steady. "She's spent the last 5 years tearing down the most important relationship in her life, including the one with me. Now she has to deal with the consequences of her choices." "I want to help her, Jake," Bradley said. "I do. But she won't listen. She's too proud to ask for help." "And what exactly are you offering?" I asked. "Help her get back on her feet?" "With what?" "She has no inheritance left, no money to fall back on. She made her bed, Bradley. Now she has to lie in it." There was a long pause on the line. Do you think she can learn from this?" Bradley asked softly. "I hope so," I replied. "But learning requires responsibility. Emma has to face the truth, and I don't think she's ready for that yet." It didn't take long for the media to catch wind of the story. News outlets across the country were covering Emma's downfall. Headlines read, "Billionaire's daughter loses inheritance after public family feud," and "Socialite's $33 million inheritance revoked after disrespecting family." I tried to avoid the media circus, but I couldn't escape it. They had all picked up on the story, and suddenly, Emma's private life was out there for the world to see. The reporters and journalists had all the facts, most of them, anyway. They had the story of Emma's public disgrace, the confrontation at the country club, the evidence of her mistreatment of me. But they didn't know the whole truth. They didn't know how much it hurt to watch my daughter throw away everything I had worked for. They didn't know how hard it had been to let her go. I wasn't interested in the media attention, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that the truth was out there. People were finally seeing Emma for who she had become, not who she had pretended to be. It wasn't until Thursday evening that I received another call from Emma. This time, the voice on the other end was different. It was shaky, uncertain, and small. "Dad," she said quietly, "can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I had no idea what to expect from this conversation. Emma had already made her choices. But something in her voice, something about the way she said my name, made me pause. "Where are you?" I asked. I'm at home. I need to talk to you." I took a deep breath and agreed to meet her. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if this was the start of her finally understanding what she had done or just another attempt to manipulate me. When I arrived at her apartment, she was waiting for me by the door. She was wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked different, smaller, like the world she had built for herself had crumbled away. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "Can we sit?" I nodded, following her inside. We sat down on the couch, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. There was so much unsaid between us. So many years of misunderstandings, hurt and resentment. I'm sorry, Emma finally said, breaking the silence. I've been a terrible daughter. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. She wasn't the confident, successful woman she had once been. She was someone who had lost everything and was finally facing the consequences of her actions. I treated you like you didn't matter, she continued. I thought I was better than you. I thought your job didn't mean anything. But now I see that I was wrong. I see that. I see that everything I did was because I was ashamed of who I was. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I sat there, taking in her words. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't enough. But it was a start. You don't have to apologize for what you've done, Emma, I said quietly. But you do have to understand that respect isn't something you can take back. You've burned bridges, and those bridges may never be rebuilt. I know, she whispered. But I want to try. I want to change. Her words hung in the air between us, like a fragile thread, barely holding on. Emma, the woman who had spent years ashamed of her roots, was now admitting to the truth: she wanted to change. But change wasn't something you could achieve just by saying the words. It had to come from within, and it had to be backed by actions. I stared at her for a long time, unsure of how to respond. This wasn't just about her words anymore. It was about whether she was finally ready to face the consequences of her actions, whether she could truly rebuild herself after everything she had lost. You've said it before, Emma, I said quietly, my voice steady but carrying the weight of years of disappointment. You've wanted to change. But actions speak louder than words. The problem isn't that you don't know what you've done. The problem is what you've done with that knowledge. She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. I could see the guilt written all over her face. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was seeing my daughter again, the girl who used to be full of promise, who looked up to me, who believed in the simple things in life. But all of that had been overshadowed by the desire to belong, to be seen as something she wasn't. I know I can't fix everything in a day, Emma whispered, her voice breaking. But I'm trying. I've started therapy. I'm volunteering at a shelter for homeless families. I'm doing everything I can to prove that I'm not just a person who lives off a trust fund. I don't want to be that person anymore. Her words were sincere, and for the first time, I believed her. It wasn't easy to admit, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. A step toward redemption. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if Emma could ever return to the person I once knew, but I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the start of her realizing that money doesn't define you. It never has. I'm proud of you, Emma, I said finally, my voice soft but firm. Not for the money, not for the things you've bought, but for what you're doing now. You've taken the first step. But remember, this road won't be easy. It's not about winning me back or winning anyone else's approval. It's about earning your own respect. She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with tears that hadn't fallen. I know, Dad. I've hurt you more than I can ever express, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I will spend the rest of my life proving that I'm not the person I was. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey or if she would fall back into old habits. But one thing was clear, Emma had finally seen the truth. She had seen the damage she had done, and for the first time, she was taking responsibility for it. The phone rang late one evening, and I didn't have to look at the caller ID to know who it was. It was Emma. She had called me every week since our conversation, always checking in, always making sure I knew that she was doing the work. But this call was different. I could hear it in her voice. Dad? she said, her tone more confident, yet still tinged with vulnerability. I got a job. I'm starting next week. It's not much, just an administrative assistant position at a nonprofit. But they help underprivileged kids get scholarships for college. It's entry-level, but it's something I'm proud of. A smile tugged at the corner of my lips, and I felt a warmth spread through me that I hadn't felt in a long time. That's great, Emma. I'm proud of you. I'm scared, she admitted. But I'm also grateful. I don't have much, but I'm learning. I'm learning how to live with less, and I'm learning how to live for something other than my image. Her words reminded me of the girl I had once known, the girl who had worked hard to build a life with me, not because of what she had, but because of who she was. I'm proud of you, Emma, I said again, this time with more conviction. You're doing the right thing. And remember, this is just the beginning. You're building a life that's based on who you are, not who you want to be. And that's what matters. She sniffled, and I could hear her wiping her nose. I've been working on my relationship with people too, Dad. I've been writing letters to everyone I hurt, taking responsibility for the things I've done. It's been hard, but I know I have to do it. You're doing well, Emma, I said, a sense of pride swelling in my chest. Just keep going. Take it one step at a time. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. The most important thing is that you're trying. After a few more minutes of talking, we hung up, and I sat back in my chair, feeling a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in years. Maybe there was hope for Emma after all. Maybe, in time, we could rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't long after that phone call that Emma showed up at my doorstep unannounced. She had always been a planner, someone who liked to control every situation. But this time, she came without warning, and she looked different. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfectly styled hair, and the air of entitlement. She was just Emma. Dad? She asked, standing on the porch with a nervous smile. Can we talk? I looked at her for a moment, taking in the woman she had become. Of course, Emma. Come inside. We sat down at the kitchen table, and for the first time in a long time, we were just two people, no longer bound by the pain of the past but unsure of what the future held. I've been thinking about everything, she started, her voice quieter now, more grounded. About the inheritance, about everything I've done. I know I can't undo it, but I want to make it right. I want to make things right with you. I know you do, I said gently. But making it right isn't about grand gestures or buying things back. It's about showing up every day and doing the work. It's about being honest, with yourself and with everyone around you. I'm ready to do the work, she said, her voice firm. I've been going to therapy. I'm volunteering at the shelter every weekend. I'm learning how to budget, how to live without the comforts I was used to. It's hard, but I'm doing it. And I'm ready to start rebuilding my life. I looked at her for a long moment, watching the determination in her eyes. You don't have to prove anything to me, Emma. You've already started proving it to yourself. She smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw the girl I had raised. She wasn't perfect, and she knew it. But she was finally taking responsibility for her actions, and that was more than I could have ever hoped for. I want to apologize, Dad, she said, her voice breaking again. For everything I said, for everything I did. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I hope that, one day, you will. I already have, Emma, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But forgiveness doesn't mean we forget. It means we move forward, one step at a time. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the years lifting slowly. I didn't know what the future held for us, But I knew this, Emma had changed. And that, more than anything, was worth holding on to. In the months that followed, Emma continued to work hard on rebuilding her life. She got another job at a nonprofit, one that helped underprivileged kids gain access to higher education. She continued volunteering at the shelter, continued working on herself, and continued making amends where she could. And slowly, I began to see the person I had raised, a person who valued honesty, hard work, and character. I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to the way things were, but that was okay. We were moving forward, and that was all that mattered. Emma had learned that wealth didn't define her. It didn't define any of us. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of her, not for the money she had or the things she had bought, but for the woman she was becoming. Respect is earned, not inherited. And Emma had finally learned that lesson. Months had passed since Emma started her journey of self-discovery. Every week, I received updates from her, sometimes in the form of a text, sometimes over a long phone call, or, in the case of the big moments, face-to-face conversations like the one we'd had months ago. She was trying. I could see that now. The wealth and the lifestyle she once held onto so tightly had begun to lose its grip on her, and the person underneath was starting to emerge, bit by bit. She had found a new job at a nonprofit organization that focused on offering scholarships for underprivileged students. It was, by her own admission, a humbling position, a far cry from the high-rise office environments she had once dreamed of working in. But Emma knew this was the path she needed to take to make amends, not just with me, but with herself. I often thought back to the early days of our life together, when it was just the two of us. I had taught Emma how to ride a bike, how to take pride in every small victory, and how to never forget where we came from. I had been proud of those lessons. Proud of who she had been before the wealth and status took hold of her. But this new version of Emma was different. She no longer wore the labels of the wealthy. She didn't need them anymore. She had learned something I never thought she would: true fulfillment comes from within, not from the things you accumulate. A year had passed since Emma's dramatic transformation, and the changes were undeniable. We had both worked through our struggles. Emma had paid off most of her debts from the years of excess, and she was now fully focused on her nonprofit work. It was clear she had found a purpose that wasn't tied to appearances or material wealth, and for the first time in a long time, she was genuinely content. One afternoon, as I was finishing up some work on a new project, I received a call from Emma. Her voice was lighter than I had heard in ages, filled with excitement. "Dad, I've got some news," she said, barely able to keep the excitement contained. "I've been asked to be on the board of the nonprofit I work for. They're giving me more responsibility and a chance to actually shape the direction of the organization." Can you believe that? I couldn't help but smile. "That's amazing, Emma. I'm proud of you." There was a pause before she spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I never would have been given this chance if I hadn't started over. If I hadn't learned to let go of all the things I thought mattered." "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And I'm proud of you for that too. You've worked hard to rebuild, and it shows." "I still have a long way to go, but this feels different, Dad. For the first time, I'm working because I want to, not because I have to prove something to someone else," she said. "And that's worth more than any inheritance." I could feel the pride swelling inside me. It wasn't the kind of pride that came from money or success. It was a pride that came from knowing she had grown into a woman who valued herself and her actions above all else. It was about 6 months later when Emma and I finally sat down for dinner, just the two of us. No fancy restaurants, no pretense, just a simple meal at home. She had prepared it herself, a modest dish she had learned to cook during the past year, when she had taken the time to understand the value of self-sufficiency. The conversation was easy. It wasn't forced or filled with the awkwardness that had characterized our earlier interactions. It was natural. We spoke about her work, the people she was meeting, and how she was making a difference in her community. We spoke about the old days, too, when life was simpler. And in those moments, I realized something important. This was the Emma I had always hoped would return. Not the one driven by wealth, status, or image, but the one driven by purpose, respect, and hard work. As we finished the meal, Emma looked at me across the table, her expression serious. "Dad, I've been thinking," she began, her hands clasped together on the table. "I'm ready to make things right. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to start over, with you. I want to rebuild our relationship. I've been asking myself how I can make up for the years I wasted. And I think it starts here, with you and me. Not with any money or status, but with the love and respect we've always had." I could feel the emotion building up in my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt my heart soften. "I've always loved you, Emma," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Even when you were at your worst. And I've always believed you could come back from this. But it's not just about fixing things between us. It's about you fixing what's inside you." "I'm doing that," she said, her voice steady now. "And I'll keep doing it, no matter what." As the years passed, our relationship grew stronger. We didn't pretend the past didn't exist. We didn't try to erase the pain. But we found a way forward, one step at a time. Emma continued her work in the nonprofit sector, using her position to help children who had been given fewer opportunities than she ever had. She wasn't just a product of her wealth anymore. She was a force for good, and for the first time, I was able to see the woman she had become, beyond the money, beyond the mistakes. And as for me, I had long since stopped looking at her through the lens of disappointment. I had learned to accept that she wasn't perfect, none of us are. But she was trying, and in the end, that was what mattered. On a quiet afternoon, sitting on the porch of the house where I had raised Emma, I looked out at the familiar view, the same view I had looked at for so many years. The world had changed around me, but the lessons I had taught Emma remained. Respect isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn, through every choice you make, every action you take. Emma had learned that, in the hardest way possible. And as I watched her from across the yard, laughing with friends, helping someone out, giving back, living a life that was about more than just herself, I knew that, despite everything, we were both better for the journey. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned, one choice at a time. And so, Emma's journey wasn't just about regaining what she had lost, it was about rediscovering who she was, beyond the money, beyond the image, and finding her true purpose in life. Through hard work, accountability, and the lessons learned from the past, she rebuilt her relationship with her father and became someone she could finally be proud of. Remember, respect isn't something that's inherited or bought. It's earned, one choice at a time. And it's never too late to change your story. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about Emma's transformation. Did she truly earn her redemption? And make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.